It's difficult even now to pinpoint the exact moment the ground shifted beneath my feet. Perhaps it was always unstable, built on lies I was too trusting, too invested to see. We'd been married barely 2 months. 2 months of adjusting to shared space, of the quiet satisfaction of calling him my husband, of trying to believe that this finally was the settled happiness I'd hoped for. 37 isn't old, but after years navigating the dating scene as a professional woman, an advocate, dealing daily with the sharp edges of human conflict, finding someone who seemed genuine, who seemed to want the same quiet, child-free life I did, felt like a reprieve. Michael, M39 when we married, seemed solid, kind even. He knew about my past, the years of trying, the eventual acceptance, the diagnosis, premature ovarian failure, a neat clinical term for heartbreak and closed doors. He knew my decision to embrace a life without children wasn't just a preference but a necessity I'd come to terms with. He claimed to want the same. That was the bedrock, or so I thought. Our life together was meant to be simpler, focused on us, our careers, travel perhaps. Calm. My sister, Chloe, F27, had always been different. 10 years younger, she still seemed to be flitting through life. Beautiful, certainly. Magnetic, in a way that often left chaos in its wake. She'd married young to a genuinely decent man, James. Also 27 then, and they had a young son. There was always a faint, unspoken rivalry between us, perhaps inevitable with the age gap and our different paths. I focused on my demanding career, building stability. She seemed to drift, charming her way through situations. We weren't estranged, but not confidants either. Polite family gatherings, occasional calls. She'd been maid of honor at the wedding, smiling brightly in the photos. A picture of sisterly support. A support I now understand was utterly false. The cracks, looking back, were perhaps there sooner than I registered. Michael became attentive, almost overly so after the wedding. Compensating, I see now. A forced cheerfulness that didn't quite reach his eyes. Chloe, too, had a new sort of energy around us. A strange mix of avoidance and a barely concealed smirk. There were whispers I'd catch snippets of when I entered a room. H and S suddenly going quiet. Inside jokes I wasn't privy to. Once, reviewing our joint account statements, something I do meticulously, a habit from my profession, I noticed a couple of unexplained cash withdrawals. Small amounts, easily explained away. Michael waved it off. Parking for that client meeting downtown. Picking up coffees for the team. Plausible enough. I didn't push. Why would I? This was Michael. Solid. Kind. The illusion didn't just crack. It shattered. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Mundane. Ordinary. I was gathering laundry. Michael had already left for work. Chloe wasn't living with us, of course, but she visited sometimes, usually when Michael was home. I reached into the small bin in our ensuite bathroom, the one mostly used for tissues or cotton pads. Beneath a single tissue, there it was. Small, plastic, unmistakable. A positive pregnancy test. Time seemed to stutter. I picked it up, my fingers suddenly numb. It wasn't mine. It couldn't be mine. My diagnosis wasn't ambiguous. Natural conception wasn't just unlikely, it was medically impossible. My mind raced, searching for any other explanation. A friend visiting? Number one had stayed over, left by a cleaner. We didn't have one yet. Then the other possibility, the only one left, slammed into me with physical force. Chloe. She'd been over Sunday afternoon complaining of feeling unwell. She'd used this bathroom. Michael had been here too. I sank onto the closed toilet lid, the plastic stick cold in my hand. The world tilted. The dates collided in my head. 2 lines meant pregnant. She was married, but the test was here, in our bin, discarded carelessly or perhaps placed deliberately. A subconscious slip or a cruel silent message. Bile rose in my throat. I wanted to scream, to break something, to confront them both immediately. But years in courtrooms, facing down hostility and deceit, had taught me composure, at least externally. Inside, I was fragmenting. That evening was surreal. Chloe came over unexpectedly, ostensibly to drop off a book she'd borrowed. She looked pale, definitely unwell now I was seeing it properly. She mentioned feeling nauseous. Before the broken pieces of me could react with the raw rage churning inside, the calculated part of my brain took over. The part that knew I needed certainty, needed proof, needed strategy. I went to the kitchen, my movements stiff, robotic. I poured her a glass of ginger ale. For the nausea, I said, forcing my voice into a tone of polite concern, offering it with a smile that felt like shards of glass stretching my lips. You really should take better care of yourself, Chloe. Her eyes flickered. Perhaps surprise at my solicitude. Perhaps something else. Guilt? Smugness? I couldn't tell. She thanked me, taking a sip, seemingly oblivious to the earthquake that had just leveled my world. Michael watched us both, his expression carefully neutral. The first act of my hideous new reality had begun. Maintain the facade. Gather the truth. The days that followed were a masterclass in dissociation. I went to work. I attended meetings. I drafted arguments, all while my mind operated on two separate tracks. One performed the necessary functions of daily life. The other was a cold, analytical engine, turning over the betrayal, calculating angles, assessing damage. The grief was immense, a physical weight pressing down on my chest, stealing my breath at odd moments. But alongside it grew something else, a cold, hard resolve. They would not destroy me. They had inflicted a wound I might never heal from, but they would not get away with it. I needed proof, not just suspicions, undeniable, concrete proof of the affair, of the paternity, of the deception. The trash can test was a starting point, but I needed more for what I knew was coming. My legal training kicked in, evidence gathering. First, the low-hanging fruit. I discreetly purchased a high-quality GPS tracker, the kind often used for fleet management but small enough to be inconspicuous. Late one night, while Michael slept the sleep of the ignorant or the utterly unburdened, I slipped out to the garage. My hands trembled as I attached the magnetic device underneath the chassis of his car, tucked away where it wouldn't be easily seen during a casual wash. It felt sordid, violating, but the violation had already happened, directed at me. This was merely uncovering the extent of it. Then, the digital realm. We shared certain things. A family cloud account for photos, a linked smart thermostat, occasionally location sharing, for convenience when meeting up. Conveniences I now turned into instruments of investigation. I started checking logs remotely. Find My Phone pinged his location frequently near Chloe and James's suburban home during work hours when he claimed to be in client meetings across town. The smart thermostat log showed temperature adjustments at our flat during times I was definitely out. But the GPS showed Michael wasn't home either, suggesting someone else, Chloe, had been there. Calendar entries marked private appointment coincided perfectly with the GPS showing his car parked near a prominent OB/GYN clinic downtown, a clinic Chloe definitely didn't use for her first pregnancy. Each piece of data was a small stab, twisting the knife they'd already lodged in my back. I saved screenshots, cross-referenced times, built a timeline. The pattern was sickeningly clear. This wasn't a recent fling. This had been going on for months, possibly longer. Before the engagement, before we even met, the depth of the betrayal was unfathomable. With a growing dossier of circumstantial but damning digital evidence, I made the next crucial call. Not to my usual network of colleagues. I couldn't bear the thought of anyone I knew personally handling this yet. I researched online, finding a shark, a divorce lawyer known for being ruthless, meticulous, and utterly discreet, based in a different city. I used a burner phone and paid the initial consultation fee in cash. Sitting in her sterile, intimidating office felt like stepping across a final threshold. I laid out the situation calmly, factually. The short marriage, my infertility diagnosis, the pregnancy test, the GPS data, the digital logs. I handed over a copy of our prenup, a document Michael had initially resisted but my own solicitor father had insisted upon, thank God. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Eleanor Vance, listened intently, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she nodded slowly. The short duration of the marriage simplifies things significantly regarding spousal maintenance. As you know, she said, her voice crisp, minimal joint assets acquired post-marriage helps too, but the infidelity, particularly with a close family member, and the circumstances surrounding the pregnancy. That's leverage. Advocate. She scanned the prenup. Ah yes, standard infidelity clause, not overly punitive financially in this jurisdiction, mainly grounds. But this, she tapped a section, fraudulent concealment. If he knew about the affair, or especially if he believed he was the father of your sister's child, before or during the marriage and didn't disclose it, that could potentially void certain spousal claims he might attempt, however weak, and significantly impacts arguments about dissipation of marital assets if he spent joint funds on her. She leaned forward. But the linchpin? Your documented infertility. If you can medically prove you could not have conceived during that period, his claim or any assumption of paternity regarding your potential childbearing is moot, and his entanglement with your sister becomes undeniable fraud if he let you believe otherwise or failed to disclose facts relevant to your marital contract. Her words solidified my resolve. The pain was still a roaring furnace inside me, but now it had direction. I need an affidavit, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, from my fertility specialist, confirming the impossibility. Get it? Eleanor stated flatly. Make it detailed, specific to the likely conception window based on your sister's apparent term. That affidavit, combined with the timeline you're building, will be devastating. Getting that affidavit was one of the hardest things I've done. Calling Dr. Evans, my kind, compassionate fertility specialist who had guided me through years of heartbreak. Explaining the situation, clinically, leaving out the raw emotion but implying the legal necessity. Asking him to put into cold, legal writing the stark reality of my body's limitations during a specific period. He was shocked, deeply sympathetic, and promised to expedite the report under absolute confidentiality. His confirmation was the final brutal piece of evidence solidifying the narrative of betrayal and fraud. Now, action. Phase 1 was about securing my position before detonation. Eleanor had advised on the delicate dance of pre-divorce finances. Suddenly moving large sums could raise flags, but securing assets, particularly my inheritance, which Michael seemed to view as implicitly ours now, was paramount. Carefully, meticulously, following legal guidelines to the letter, I began transferring funds. My inheritance, which had been sitting in an account Michael had recently gained secondary access to, a convenience he'd pushed for, was moved first, legally partitioned into a new trust account solely under my name and control, citing estate planning consolidation as the paper reason. Other joint savings were carefully shifted, documented plausible expenditures made to reduce balances, diverting funds into my newly opened personal accounts. Every transaction was logged, every justification considered. It felt cold, calculating, but necessary. They had planned, it seemed from the digital whispers I'd unearthed, to potentially leverage my money. That door needed to be slammed shut and locked. While securing finances, I started the subtle social engineering. At a family dinner, one I forced myself to attend, I steered the conversation towards Michael's demanding job. He's been working so hard, I sighed, looking at him with what I hoped passed for loving concern across the table. So dedicated, I honestly don't know how he does it, but his loyalty is just incredible. Aren't we lucky, Chloe? I directed the last part to my sister, watching her freeze for a split second, a flicker of panic in her eyes before she forced a smile. My parents murmured agreement about Michael's work ethic. Planting the seed of his supposed virtue now would make the later reveal of his depravity even more shocking to them. A few days later, talking to my mother on the phone, I employed the second tactic. "I'm a bit worried about Chloe," I said, injecting faux concern into my voice. "She seemed so peaky at dinner, didn't she? Complaining about feeling sick again. I hope it's nothing serious. She just seems off, you know? Has she said anything to you?" My mother, naturally protective, expressed concern and promised to check in on her more. Perfect. Let the family's gentle inquiries add pressure. Let Chloe squirm under their innocent scrutiny regarding her mysterious illness. Let them see her paleness, her nausea, maybe even start counting dates themselves, subconsciously. Weeks passed in this state of suspended animation, of outward smiles and inward plotting. I collected more data. GPS logs showing late nights not at the office, but parked outside anonymous suburban motels. Shared calendar alerts for more private appointments at the OB/GYN. The weight of the evidence was becoming unbearable, matched only by the cold fury fueling my actions. Then, the culmination of Phase 1 arrived with almost cinematic timing. Mid-morning, I received a secure digital notification from Dr. Evans' office. The affidavit was ready, uploaded to a secure portal. I downloaded it, my heart pounding as I read the clinical language confirming everything. Impossible. No chance. The time frame was locked down. This document was the key legal weapon. And barely an hour later, while I was still processing the finality of the medical proof, my phone buzzed. An alert from my bank, the newly secured inheritance trust account. Alert. Large transfer request initiated by secondary signatory, Michael's name, failed. Insufficient signatory authority, account security protocol activated. He'd tried it. He and Chloe, emboldened perhaps by my seeming ignorance or compliance, had attempted to make their move on the money they thought was partially his by marriage, and they had hit the brick wall I'd meticulously constructed. A second buzz, a text message from Michael. Simple, confused, bordering on demanding. "What's wrong with the inheritance account? Transfer didn't go through. Need to sort this ASAP." I looked at his message. I looked at the downloaded affidavit on my screen. I thought of the positive test in the trash can, the whispers, the lies, the ginger ale, the GPS tracker blinking patiently on my laptop screen, showing his car currently parked, not at his office, but back near that same OB/GYN clinic S frequented. A cold, razor-sharp smile finally touched my lips, devoid of any warmth, devoid of any lingering affection. Phase 1 was complete. The traps were set. The evidence was secured. Their own greed had sprung the first snare. He had no idea what ASAP truly meant now. Seeing Michael's text demanding answers about the inheritance account was the signal, not for panic, but for the final phase, his attempt to access my secured funds. The sheer audacity of it after everything confirmed the depth of their planned betrayal. It wasn't just an affair. It was calculated financial opportunism built on deception. That knowledge cooled the burning pain inside me into something akin to glacial resolve. There was no more room for doubt, only for execution. My first call wasn't back to Michael. I simply didn't reply to his text, but to Eleanor Vance, my lawyer. I forwarded her the bank alert and Michael's message. "He tried it," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the tremor I felt internally. "He and Chloe, they went for the inheritance. The bank stopped it, as planned." Eleanor's reply was immediate and businesslike. "Excellent. This constitutes a clear attempt at dissipation of assets, potentially fraudulent given the circumstances we suspect. It gives us solid grounds for immediate protective measures. Are you ready to proceed with freezing everything else?" "Yes," I said. There was no hesitation. "Freeze it all. Joint accounts, shared credit lines he has access to. Everything we legally can, right now." "Consider it done," Eleanor confirmed. "I'll file the emergency motions this morning, citing attempted fraudulent transfer and risk of further dissipation based on this incident and the evidence you've provided regarding the affair." Within hours, the financial vice began to tighten. Eleanor worked swiftly. Emergency court orders were sought and granted based on the blatant transfer attempt. Our main joint checking account, frozen. The joint savings account we'd barely started, frozen. The high-limit credit card Michael often used for business expenses, canceled due to suspicious activity reported by me, the primary cardholder. I imagined his dawning panic, a declined card at lunch, an ATM machine refusing to dispense cash. The sudden, terrifying realization that the financial rug had been pulled out from under him. Chloe, likely expecting a share of the inheritance windfall he'd promised, would be discovering the well was dry. Their panic was almost palpable, even from a distance. I heard later, through a family member who hadn't yet chosen a side, that Michael had called his parents in a frantic state, claiming I had gone crazy, that I'd locked him out of our money for no reason. The narrative spin had begun, but I knew it wouldn't hold. With the financial levers pulled, it was time for the confrontation. I didn't want yelling or screaming. I wanted cold, undeniable proof delivered with quiet finality. I decided on a meeting at the flat. My flat now, in essence, though legally still complicated until the divorce finalized. I texted Michael, "We need to talk about the accounts and some other matters. Come to the flat this evening at 7. It's important." He agreed immediately, likely thinking he could manipulate or demand his way back into financial access. Then I texted Chloe separately. "Michael is coming over at 7 to discuss something important regarding family finances. Given your recent closeness, perhaps you should be here too." It was a calculated gamble, playing on her presumed desire to control the narrative alongside Michael, maybe even hoping to present a united front. She took the bait. "Fine, I'll be there." The hours leading up to 7 p.m. were spent preparing. Not food, not drinks. I prepared the evidence box. It wasn't a literal box, but several stark black binders laid out on the coffee table. Each binder was meticulously labeled. Binder 1, Financials. Printouts of the joint accounts showing his spending. The failed inheritance transfer attempt documentation. Copies of his credit card statements revealing hotel stays and gifts I now knew were for Chloe. Binder 2, Digital footprints. Printouts of the incriminating GPS logs mapping his trips to motels and the OBGYN clinic. Time-stamped correlations from Find My Phone. Excerpts from the smart home logs. Key incriminating emails or texts I'd managed to recover. Binder 3, Medical and legal. A copy of our prenup with the infidelity and fraud clauses starkly highlighted. My fertility specialist's notarized affidavit confirming my impossibility of conception during the relevant time frame, and finally, clear copies of the positive pregnancy test I'd retrieved from the trash. Binder 4 contained only empty sleeves, awaiting evidence yet to come, like deposition transcripts and court orders. They arrived separately, but within minutes of each other, affecting nonchalance that failed miserably. Michael launched immediately into indignant questions about the bank account, demanding explanations. Chloe hovered near him, attempting a look of concerned, sisterly support, her hand protectively near her now noticeably pregnant stomach. I didn't raise my voice. I simply gestured to the coffee table. "Sit down," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. "Before we discuss the accounts, we need to review some background information." They hesitated, then sat, suddenly wary. I didn't sit with them. I stood, a detached observer of my own life's implosion. "Binder 1, I began, opening the first one. Finances. Let's start with the joint account expenditures correlating to undisclosed hotel stays, shall we? Or perhaps the recent attempt to transfer funds from my secured inheritance account? Michael started to bluster, denying everything. Chloe shifted uncomfortably. I ignored his protests and opened the second binder. Digital footprints. GPS logs are quite illuminating. For instance, the multiple visits to the parking lot of the Sleepwell Motel off the highway during hours you claim to be in meetings downtown, Michael. Coincidentally, matching times Chloe was also unreachable according to phone logs. And these appointments, I tapped the printout from the shared calendar beside the OBGYN visit logs, marked private. Whose privacy were we protecting exactly? Michael's face paled. Chloe's eyes darted between him and the binder, panic beginning to dawn. "This is insane," Michael stammered. "You've been spying on me?" "I've been uncovering the truth you chose to hide," I corrected him coldly. I moved to the third binder, and the truth is rather extensive. I opened it directly to the copy of the positive pregnancy test. This was in our bathroom bin, Chloe. Not mine, obviously. Her sharp intake of breath was audible. I then placed Dr. Evans's affidavit beside it. And this confirms, quite definitively, that I could not have conceived any child during the relevant time frame. I let the implication hang in the air. Michael looked stunned, trapped. Finally, I opened the prenup copy, highlighting the relevant clauses. Infidelity, fraudulent concealment, specifically entering into or continuing a marriage while concealing an ongoing affair, and, potentially, the paternity of a child with a third party, particularly a family member. Both carry significant consequences, as I'm sure your lawyers will explain. Chloe burst into tears then, not of remorse but of panic. "He pressured me." "I didn't want—" Michael rounded on her. "Don't you dare put this on me. You knew exactly what you were doing." Their unity fractured instantly under the weight of the evidence. Accusations flew back and forth between them, raw, ugly, and self-incriminating. "You said she'd never find out," Chloe shrieked at him. "You said you loved me, that you made a mistake marrying her. I only married her because she had the money, the stability." Michael retorted viciously, the mask completely gone. "You were supposed to be the fun on the side." Hearing those words, finally spoken aloud, was like another physical blow. The kindness, the solidness, all a calculated sham for financial security. I felt sick, but also strangely liberated. The truth, however brutal, was out. I let them rage at each other for a moment, then spoke over them, my voice cutting through their pathetic squabbling. "Save it for your depositions. Eleanor Vance, my solicitor, has already filed everything. You'll both be served shortly. The paternity of your child, Chloe, will be legally established. The financial fraud will be addressed. The alienation of affection suit against you has also been filed." I looked directly at Michael. "Given your admission just now about marrying me for money, combined with the fraud and infidelity, I suspect your prospects for any financial settlement beyond the strict division of minor marital assets acquired in the last 2 months are precisely zero. You should probably find yourselves very good and likely very expensive solicitors." Separately, I gestured towards the door. "Now get out of my home." They left, stumbling over themselves in their haste, faces a mixture of shock, fury, and sheer terror. The moment the door closed behind them, the strength holding me upright seemed to evaporate. I sank onto the sofa, surrounded by the binders, the cold, hard proof of their treachery. The confrontation hadn't brought relief, only a deeper affirmation of the profound loss. But the legal storm had been unleashed. Simultaneously with the legal filings came the social detonation. Eleanor had recommended against me sending anything personally. Instead, her office used a secure third-party encrypted email service to send a carefully curated package of information. Not the entire evidence box, but enough to be undeniable. Anonymized snippets of the GPS logs showing motel visits, a few key incriminating text messages, names redacted but context clear, a summary of the timeline highlighting the affair predated the wedding, the fact of S's pregnancy by H, and the attempted inheritance grab. The email explicitly mentioned the infertility diagnosis and the fraud aspect. It was sent to our entire extended family, mutual friends whose email addresses were known, and, crucially, a few key contacts at the family company, where Michael and Chloe had worked alongside my father before his retirement. The fallout was immediate and seismic. My phone blew up, but this time with messages of shock, support, and apologies from family members who hadn't known. My parents were beyond devastated, but unequivocally on my side, immediately cutting off all contact with Chloe. My other sister was furious on my behalf. Michael's parents apparently tried to defend him initially, until someone forwarded them the specific evidence of the financial plotting, at which point their support reportedly cooled significantly. Chloe became persona non grata overnight, James, her estranged husband, apparently received a copy too, hardening his resolve in their own divorce proceedings. The narrative was firmly established. This wasn't just a sordid affair, it was a calculated, fraudulent attack on me by the two people I should have been able to trust most. Their social world imploded. The legal battle moved swiftly, largely because their position was indefensible. Yet, in their initial depositions, they continued to dig their own graves. Both Michael and Chloe attempted to lie under oath, sticking to a flimsy narrative that the affair began after the wedding, that the pregnancy was a surprise and mistake, that the inheritance transfer attempt was a misunderstanding about account access. Eleanor, armed with the timeline evidence from GPS, texts, and my affidavit, clinically dismantled their stories. She presented contradicting evidence point by point, catching them in lie after lie. I heard their own lawyers warned them strongly about perjury, but desperation made them reckless. Their recklessness extended beyond the courtroom. Cornered, financially crippled, and socially ostracized, one or both of them snapped. I started receiving venomous voicemails, late-night texts filled with threats and blame. "You ruined my life," Michael screamed in one message. "You vindictive ish. You'll pay for this." Chloe sent tearful, manipulative texts, alternating between begging for forgiveness and blaming me for tearing the family apart. I didn't respond. I simply forwarded every single message, every voicemail file, directly to Eleanor. Each outburst only strengthened my case, highlighting their instability and lack of remorse, potentially bolstering my arguments for restraining orders if needed, and certainly painting them in the worst possible light before the court. The court ordered the paternity test for Chloe's baby. The wait for the results felt academic to me. I already knew the truth, but it was a necessary legal step. When the results came back confirming Michael was the father, it was the final nail in the coffin of his legal defense regarding fraudulent concealment. The timeline was now irrefutable. He knowingly entered the marriage while actively involved in an affair that resulted in a child with my sister, concealing these material facts. The final court rulings felt almost anticlimactic after the preceding storm. The divorce was granted quickly, as expected, due to the marriage's short duration, the blatant infidelity proven, and the demonstrated financial fraud. Michael received nothing beyond his personal belongings and half of any negligible assets accumulated after the wedding date, which amounted to virtually zero. The prenup was fully enforced regarding my separate property and inheritance. His claims for support were dismissed entirely. The judge even made remarks about his lack of credibility and attempts to dissipate assets. Adding a layer of brutal irony, the court ordered Michael to pay child support to Chloe for the daughter born of their affair, based on his legally confirmed paternity. Their betrayal had financially ruined him, socially isolated them both, and now legally bound them together through a child conceived in deceit. The alienation of affection suit against Chloe proceeded. While enforceability varies, winning a judgment, even if difficult to collect, was another formal condemnation of her actions. Their ruin was complete. Michael lost his job shortly after the anonymous email blast revealed the extent of the scandal. Chloe was completely cut off by the family, struggling financially. Her own divorce from James likely leaving her paying maintenance, given her previously higher earnings and infidelity. I heard whispers they were living together in some cheap rental, trapped in the wreckage they created, reportedly miserable and blaming each other. And me? The pain didn't vanish overnight. The heartbreak was profound, a scar I would carry. But as the legal dust settled, as the consequences of their choices played out, something shifted within me. The anger cooled, not into forgiveness, but into a vast, quiet space of indifference. Their fate, their misery, their existence. It simply stopped registering on my emotional radar. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about excision. They were removed from my life, my thoughts, my future. I focused on my work, finding solace in the logic and structure of the law. I leaned on my supportive family and friends who had rallied around me. I started seeing the counselor, beginning the long process of processing the trauma, not to forgive them, but to heal myself. I didn't need to watch them burn. I just needed them gone. They were selfish, yes. They destroyed the life I thought I had, yes. But they didn't destroy me. I stood, scarred but whole, finally looking forward, leaving them behind in the ashes of the life they torched themselves. They simply didn't matter anymore. That's all for this story. I'll be back with another one. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It motivates me to create more content like this.